The summer of 1944. Following the brutal fighting in the hedgerows, the Allied armies executed Operation Cobra, shattering the German lines and breaking out from the Normandy beachhead. It was a victory of speed and maneuver. General George S. Patton's Third Army became the spearhead, racing across France, covering ground at a relentless pace that shattered German morale and destroyed pockets of resistance. But this very success created an impossible crisis. The American doctrine of highly mechanized warfare was, ironically, about to be defeated by its own appetite. Each armored and infantry division required an astronomical amount of supplies, up to 750 tons of food, ammunition, and spares daily. Patton's tanks and trucks alone consumed an average of 400,000 gallons of gasoline every single day. The front line, which had been just miles from the coast, was now hundreds of miles deep into France. The armies were literally outrunning their supply lines. The forward edge of battle, the point of decision, was dangerously close to grinding to a halt, not because of the enemy, but because the last can of beans had been eaten, and the gas tanks were dry. Victory itself was on the verge of stalling. The traditional backbone of military supply, ports and railways, was useless. Allied bombing had successfully crippled the German rail network, but that same success now prevented the Allies from using it. Crucial deepwater ports like Le Havre and Brest were still fiercely defended by German garrisons, or lay in ruins. The entire Allied operation was relying on supplies ferried directly across the Normandy beaches, a massive, inefficient bottleneck. The logistical equation was simple and terrifying. You cannot fight without fuel, and you cannot move fuel hundreds of miles without a robust transport network. The French infrastructure was in chaos, and time was running out. The Supreme Commander, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, recognized that the window of opportunity to defeat the Germans before winter was rapidly closing. Faced with this impending disaster, a small group of Quartermaster and Transportation Corps officers, led by Brigadier General Ewart G. Plank and Colonel Loren Albert Ayres, gathered for an emergency 36-hour brainstorming session. Their solution was radical: create a temporary but colossal emergency trucking system. This system had to function like a fixed pipeline, moving supplies non-stop from the coast to the front. General Plank famously declared the operational imperative: let it never be said that a shortage of supplies stopped Patton when the Germans couldn't. The plan was born in sheer desperation, demanding the immediate mobilization of thousands of trucks and thousands of men, a feat of organization previously unseen in military history. The operation officially commenced on August 25, 1944. The operation was officially designated the Red Ball Express, a term borrowed from American railroad slang dating back to the late 19th century, where a red ball indicated a high-priority, express freight train that other traffic must yield to. To maintain the necessary speed and volume, the planners instituted a strict and innovative one-way loop system. Two parallel highways running hundreds of miles were chosen. The northern road was dedicated exclusively to supply convoys heading east to the front, and the southern road was reserved solely for empty trucks returning west to the supply depots. This system was rigorously marked with the iconic red ball signs, and military police were posted to enforce the rule: no civilian traffic, no unauthorized military traffic. This dedicated route was the key to unlocking the Allies' mechanical momentum. While ammunition, ordnance, and rations were delivered, the real king of cargo for the Red Ball Express was fuel, petroleum, oil, and lubricants. Without gas, the entire Allied mechanized assault simply ceased to exist. Trucks were often loaded almost entirely with stacks of jerrycans, the essential metal fuel containers. The drivers were engaged in a literal race against the fuel gauge of the tanks on the front line. Every mile they covered was a mile less the tanks had to retreat. This non-stop, high-speed movement of highly flammable cargo under constant threat defined the danger and the importance of every single Red Ball trucker. The U.S. Army was a segregated institution in 1944. Due to discriminatory policies rooted in deep-seated prejudice, military leadership largely restricted black soldiers to non-combat, service, and supply roles. Commanders believed these soldiers lacked the necessary skill or courage for frontline fighting. This systemic racism, however, ironically provided the manpower the Red Ball Express desperately needed. When the call went out for drivers, the vast pool of African American service troops was immediately tapped. They became the backbone of the entire operation. Of the roughly 23,000 men involved in the Red Ball Express, an astonishing 75% were African American. They weren't just drivers. They were mechanics, traffic controllers, and depot workers. They joined from quartermaster units and port battalions, often with minimal training for the grueling cross-country hauls they were about to face. Despite the overwhelming statistics, this massive contribution by black soldiers was rarely acknowledged in contemporary news reports or official military history, effectively erasing their essential role in the victory. The service these soldiers provided was heroic, yet they faced constant discrimination. They were often given older, poorly maintained trucks that had been rejected by white unit. They lived in segregated bivouac areas, and faced the daily indignities of a racially divided army. They were not only racing against the German army, but were simultaneously struggling against the pervasive stereotypes and institutional racism that sought to minimize their dedication and courage. Many of these men had signed up expecting to fight for democracy abroad, only to find themselves fighting for dignity within their own rank. In response to the racist stereotypes that claimed black soldiers were lazy or unskilled, the Red Ball drivers adopted a defiant, unofficial motto: tout de suite, French for immediately or right away. This phrase encapsulated their relentless work ethic. The drivers pushed themselves to the limit, driving long beyond prescribed shift times and often skipping breaks and hot meals just to keep the convoys rolling. Their performance was a direct, powerful rebuttal to the Army's prejudiced policies. The routine was brutal. Drivers often worked in two-man teams, rarely getting more than 4 hours of sleep per 24-hour period. The round trip from the Normandy coast to the forward depots could take up to 54 hours. The extreme speed required to meet the demands meant official rules, like maintaining a distance of 60 yards between trucks and observing a 25 miles per hour speed limit, were widely ignored. Drivers pushed their deuce-and-a-half trucks to their mechanical breaking point, knowing that failure to deliver fuel or ammo could lead to disaster for their comrades on the front lines. While the overwhelming majority of drivers were men, the Red Ball Express operation relied on the essential support of the Women's Army Corps, WWIIs. Though not serving as drivers on the grueling front-line routes, WWII personnel filled critical administrative roles, managed records, tracked inventory, and ensured logistical paperwork was processed rapidly. Their contribution in the depots and headquarters helped maintain the administrative efficiency that made the physical delivery possible, underscoring that the massive operation required all available hands. The workhorse of the Red Ball Express was the rugged but often overburdened GMC 2.5-ton CCKW cargo truck, the Deuce-and-a-Half. While designed for reliability, these trucks were now pushed far beyond their intended limit. They were chronically overloaded, carrying up to 5,000 pounds of cargo, and driven almost continuously day and night. The extreme stress meant tires failed constantly, brakes overheated, and engines seized. Drivers often had to make running repairs, jury-rigging broken parts just to keep the vital supplies moving forward. Official regulations were clear: maintain 60-yard intervals and stick to a maximum speed of 25 miles per hour. In reality, these rules were immediately discarded. The urgency of the frontline demand, the race to deliver fuel to Patton, meant drivers often pushed their trucks to 45 or 50 miles per hour on narrow, congested French roads. The 54-hour round trip was a blur of speed and adrenaline, marked by dangerous passing maneuvers and near-constant exhaustion, leading to frequent accidents and vehicle losses. Discipline often broke down, but the objective was clear: delivery at any cost. The convoys ran 24 hours a day. Driving at night was perhaps the most treacherous task. To avoid becoming targets for roving German planes or long-range artillery, drivers were strictly forbidden from using full headlights. They relied instead on cat eyes, small, dim blackout lights, or simply followed the tail light of the truck ahead in pitch darkness. This created a ribbon of blacked-out steel barreling down the road, prone to sudden stops, jackknifing, and even sniper fire near the extended routes. The original Red Ball route stretched roughly 250 miles from Cherbourg and the Normandy beachhead to the logistics depot near Chartres. But as the Allied armies advanced, the route had to stretch further, rapidly extending hundreds of miles to keep pace. At its greatest length, the loop was a staggering 670-mile round trip, pushing the endurance of both the machines and the men to the absolute breaking point. This vast, guarded network truly earned its name. It was the single lifeline tethering the entire European offensive to the logistical base. For every driver, there was a repairman working around the clock. The high rate of mechanical failure meant the operation depended entirely on the skilled and tireless maintenance and ordnance teams. These mechanics, also largely African American, worked along the route and in the forward depots, salvaging parts and performing miracles of repair, often with inadequate tools and under constant pressure. They were the unseen force that kept the worn-out deuces rolling, ensuring that a breakdown never became a permanent roadblock. Maintaining order on the Red Ball Highway required a massive effort from the military police, MPs. They were stationed at every critical intersection, directing traffic, enforcing priority, and keeping unauthorized civilian and military vehicles off the express route. They were the eyes and ears of the operation, ensuring that the necessary separation between the forward and return loops was maintained, and minimizing the risk of bottlenecks that could halt the entire flow of supplies. The Red Ball Express reached its operational peak in early September 1944. On its busiest days, the River of Steel comprised over 6,000 trucks, carrying an astonishing 12,500 tons of supplies every 24 hours. These convoys, often stretching for miles, were a testament to the raw organizational power of American logistics. This wasn't just a collection of trucks, it was a pulsating artery, pumping the lifeblood of war directly to the front. The sheer volume of material moved was an unprecedented feat in military history, dwarfing anything seen before it. General George S. Patton's Third Army, renowned for its relentless, aggressive advances, was the primary beneficiary and arguably the main reason for the Red Ball's existence. Patton's tanks and armored vehicles, at times, had only hours of fuel left before grinding to a complete halt. The continuous flow of gasoline from the Red Ball Express literally kept his offensive alive. Without these dedicated truckers pushing through exhaustion and danger, Patton's famous charge across France would have stopped dead in its tracks, allowing the Germans precious time to regroup and fortify. Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower himself recognized the indispensable nature of the Red Ball Express. He famously lauded the operation as the lifeline of the entire advance, and acknowledged that it was magnificently performed. This official recognition from the highest level underscored the critical, strategic importance of the truckers' efforts, proving that victory was as much about the efficiency of the supply chain as it was about battlefield tactic. Over its 83 days of continuous operation, from August 25 to November 16, 1944, the Red Ball Express delivered a staggering total of 412,000 tons of vital supplies to the front. This immense quantity of material, enough to fill thousands of railway cars, was transported primarily by road, directly overcoming the destroyed French infrastructure. This achievement set a new standard for military logistics, demonstrating the power of dedicated, high-speed road transport in a fluid combat environment. The Red Ball Express provided the Allies with a decisive strategic advantage over the Wehrmacht. While German forces often relied on horse-drawn carts and a faltering rail network, the Allies could rapidly shift massive quantities of material. This superior logistical capability allowed them to maintain a relentless offensive, preventing the Germans from establishing stable defensive lines and dictating the pace of the war. It was a clear demonstration that in modern warfare, the ability to supply an army is as crucial as the ability to fight. Beyond fuel, the Red Ball Express was also responsible for the incredibly dangerous task of transporting vast quantities of ordnance, ammunition, artillery shells, and explosive. This cargo presented an additional layer of risk for the drivers, as a single accident or enemy attack could trigger a catastrophic explosion. The sheer volume of firepower moved ensured that Allied artillery and infantry never ran out of the means to engage the enemy, sustaining the momentum of the offensive. The Red Ball Express, conceived as a temporary solution, finally ceased operations on November 16, 1944, after 83 intense days. The continuous work of Allied engineers had paid off. Major deep-water ports like Antwerp were finally secured and crucial stretches of the French rail network were restored. Supplies could once again flow efficiently via train and through captured ports, making the costly, high-risk trucking operation obsolete. The Express accomplished its mission. It kept the armies moving long enough for the traditional supply chain to catch up. Despite their monumental success, delivering over 400,000 tons of supplies, the soldiers of the Red Ball Express were quickly dispersed. Their mission was over, and they were reassigned to other service units or rotated home. There were no victory parades for the truckers. Their job was categorized as simple service work, not combat, despite the constant threat of attack and the perilous driving conditions. For many of the black drivers, this lack of recognition was yet another bitter reminder of the racial bias within the military. The story of the Red Ball Express became a largely forgotten chapter in the official history of the war. The immense contribution of the African American soldiers, who constituted 75% of the drivers, was consistently minimized or completely omitted from post-war accounts. It was an essential story of valor, dedication, and logistical brilliance, driven by men who overcame both the enemy and the institutional prejudice of their own country. Their tireless work saved the Allied offensive, yet their names remained largely absent from the roll call of heroes. However, the legacy of the Red Ball Express extended far beyond the battlefield. The undeniable success and professionalism of the African American units proved, beyond any doubt, their capability and commitment under extreme duress. Their performance, alongside that of other black combat units, provided a powerful, undeniable argument against segregation. Just 4 years after the Red Ball Express stopped rolling, in 1948, President Harry S. Truman issued Executive Order 9981, officially desegregating the U.S. Armed Forces, an action partially credited to the proven valor of the black service troop. The principles pioneered by the Red Ball Express, the dedicated, one-way express routes, the rapid mobilization of motor transport, and the focus on PLL, petroleum, oil, and lubricants, delivery, remain foundational to modern military logistics. Every major military deployment since World War II, from the Gulf War to operations in Afghanistan, has utilized high-speed, protected supply routes that trace their lineage directly back to the desperate, 36-hour plan that created the Red Ball Highway in 1944. The Red Ball Express was more than just a convoy, it was the ultimate force multiplier. It wasn't tanks or planes that won the race across France, it was the 6,000 trucks and the 23,000 soldiers who kept them moving. Their story is a powerful reminder that victory in modern conflict hinges not just on fighting bravely, but on supplying relentlessly. The Red Ball Express lasted only 83 days, but without it, the history of the Second World War would have been drastically different. We remember the generals, the battles, and the beaches, but we must never forget the dedicated, unsung truckers who drove day and night, risking their lives, to ensure that the march to victory would never run out of gas.